We look at today's first reading, we ask the obvious question, why would a loving God demand someone to sacrifice his own child, especially his firstborn, and one that is an answer to a prayer, a child whose birth is literally a miracle? What kind of God makes such a gruesome and barbaric demand? This is a God who demands human sacrifice and finally, as if to say, I was only joking, calls off the whole thing at the last moment. It's absurd, or is it? Some people in your family and your neighborhoods, possibly in your communities, refuse to believe in God because this passage makes him seem savage and you naive. So let's try to answer these opening questions. First, when we're reading the Bible, especially the Old Testament, we can't read it as if it was written in a vacuum. It wasn't. These powerful words come to us from real people through the ages who lived real times and real situations. Abraham is living in the Middle East as a mystic and a nomad, surrounded by nomadic cultures and civilized cultures. And many of these cultures, or some of them, practiced what is indeed a barbaric practice, human sacrifice. Many do not know that human sacrifice actually was common in some cultures until they became part of the Roman Empire. It was the Romans who put an end to it in their territory, and the Spanish who put an end to it among the tribes they found in Central and South America. So human sacrifice was actually practiced in some pagan cultures, from Greece to the Americas, Borneo to China. Even the Gospels mention blood mixed with the sacrifices by Pontius Pilate. But Jewish scholars will explain that what is happening here is that God is inviting Abraham to demonstrate in the most extreme fashion his love for God. But you need to see this in context. Abraham is called out of the pagan world, for he is the first of all of us who believe. In that pagan world, for God to demand human sacrifice is not unusual. It is here that God is demanding a response from Abraham, demonstrating that he loves God that much. And in the process, and this is what's really important, God is showing definitively that this practice known outside of his people will not be known inside his people. The angel stops him because, yes, he has demonstrated his love in the way he knew. Now he will know that he will be called to demonstrate it through self-sacrifice, not human sacrifice, found among surrounding cultures. When Abraham's Hebrew descendants, however, abandoned God at times, we see in the Bible, they would practice the worst sin of the Bible, which is idolatry. And often idolatry actually involved human sacrifice. So they would not only abandon God, they would regress. They would devolve, in a sense. Their motive would often be success. The Gentile farmers have better fruits than we do. Then we should do what they do. In the movie The Passion of the Christ, directed by Mel Gibson, the children who chase after Judas represent those who were sacrificed by the Hebrews when they practiced idolatry. That exact practice is one of the locutions against Judah spoken by Jeremiah in chapter 32. In the book of Daniel, we see three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, thrown into the fire for not worshiping the idols of Babylon. They're being sacrificed. It is why the story is so important, for they survive unharmed, showing King Nebuchadnezzar that the only true God worth sacrificing to is our God, who seeks exclusively the self-sacrifice of love of God and love of neighbor. Jesus would come and take this evolution to a new stage, and that stage would be from Hammurabi, who taught in the pagan world an eye for an eye, to a tooth for a tooth, tooth for a tooth, to Jesus, who teaches that we love our enemies, do good to them, pray for them. This is the mark of the Christian. However, we need to understand this within context, because it shows how important it is that we live as the children of Abraham in our Catholic faith. This brings us to you. God has called you who are watching this, from New Hampshire to Canada, from Michigan to Lowell, whether you're sitting in your living room or you're in a hospital bed or even watching this in a coffee shop. We as Catholics have a calling to live the wisdom of God so that we can testify to it and become sacramental signs and symbols of the divine wisdom that calls for personal sacrifice out of love for others and for God himself. Nothing more, nothing less.